hands if there's a possibility that he could become a president? And do you think there could be some warning signs to Washington in his actions and his words?
Well, there are a lot of steps to go before Lee Jae-myung might become president of South Korea. He still has 5 pending legal cases that he'd have to make sure that he's qualified to be the candidate if indeed the impeachment's upheld by the Constitutional Court and then there's a special election and the Democratic Party prevails in that election. But yeah, there will be warning signs along the way, but so far I think Lee Jae-myung has already indicated a softening of his position, so he's trying clearly to do at least the minimum diplomacy necessary to reassure Washington that he would be a capable alliance partner, even while he has disagreements on how to pursue policies with China, how to pursue engagement with North Korea, how to pursue trilateral relations or not pursue trilateral relations with Japan.
And Mr. Klingner, we've seen that action from the opposition party in the impeachment motion against President Yoon. In the first impeachment motion, they put a wording about criticizing President Yoon's foreign policy, and then they took it out in the second impeachment motion, and Lee Jae-myung endorsed the U.S.-ROK alliance. But aren't there many factions within the Democratic Party which does raise concerns in Washington?
Exactly. There are differences of views within the DP. And also, I think some moderation, which I think is more for public consumption than an actual softening of their policies. As you point out, the first impeachment motion included, political differences or policy differences, where I think that reveals the true thinking of the DP more than the second impeachment motion, which was focused more on constitutional violations by President Yoon. So I think that was very revealing in the first impeachment motion, where they harshly criticized President Yoon for his bizarre or strange policy, as it was written, and very critical of what they said was the traitorous policies towards Japan. So I think on China, they want to be much more conciliatory. Lee Jae-myung talked of we should be thanking China for its actions in the Indo-Pacific, that South Korea should have no role in any kind of Taiwan contingency, when the U.S. is going to be looking for greater involvement by our Indo-Pacific allies and partners to be moving against China's coercive actions in the Indo-Pacific. Also, undoing the bilateral relations between Seoul and Tokyo, or trilateralism, also goes against U.S. strategic interests. So, there may be a bit of alignment on North Korea policy if President Trump wants to re-engage with Kim. He doesn't need to go through Seoul this time. He already has established a relationship. So in that case, the DP may just sit back and hope that there will be a lessening of tensions. But the real issue is whether any kind of agreement between the U.S. and North Korea actually reduces the threat rather than just tries to make diplomatic success, at least the appearance of it.
And I want to look more in depth about the incoming Trump administration. Dr. Cronin, can you give us a preview of the specific list that President Trump may ask of South Korea?
Well, the first thing is we need you to do more, period. So it's not something as specific as let's renegotiate the special measures agreement that was rushed through at the end of the Biden administration, but it's rather everything is on the table. We need you to help more on high technology policy. We need you to reduce the trade imbalance that's actually gone more in South Korea's favor. We need you to do more, not just on North Korea, but we need you to do more in helping us on China. And if the Democratic Party is in power in Seoul next summer, and we're asking Seoul to do more on China, as Bruce has suggested, that could be a problem. And I think that's really the sticking point. Now, maybe if Lee Jae-myung comes to power, he could probably appeal to someone like Elon Musk, if he's still around, and try to say, wait, we need to appeal to the business side and the technology side, because we actually have common interests in making sure that we're bringing China into the international manufacturing and value chain, that we both rely on.
Mm-hmm. And Mr. Klingner, President Trump named Mr. Elbridge Colby as Undersecretary of Defense for Policy. And as a frequent panelist on Washington Talk, Mr. Colby repeatedly said that South Korea should do more in defending itself, and that U.S. forces Korea should be rearranged to defend against China. Many believe Mr. Colby's view, coupled with President Trump's America First policy, may lead to adjustment in the size and the role of the USFK, and also renegotiation of the Special Measures Agreement. Do you agree with that?
Well, I think, first of all, we have to preface anything with we don't know what the Trump administration's policies will be. We don't know how much the previous statements by people who are now going into the administration reflect what the president will do. You know, that said, there certainly has been concern in Tokyo and Seoul the last several years if there is a second Trump administration, given the actions of the first, where during the special measures agreement with both countries, there was a push to make a profit off of our sons and daughters in uniform. There were threats to reduce our forces, not over strategic differences or strategic strategies, but over, you know, compensation for their deployment there. So there has been that concern. Now, as Patrick said, there is also now, I think, a bipartisan push for our allies in the region to do more against China. That is very different from, you know, during the first Trump administration, where of course there was concern about China, but now it really is being seen as an existential threat to the United States, a multifaceted threat. So that will be the predominant driver, I think, in Indo-Pacific strategy. And there has been unhappiness, particularly by the Trump administration, over our allies and partners not doing enough in the Indo-Pacific. Both Tokyo and Seoul promised to do more, and I think they have been doing more. But it's, you know, there's going to be a push for not only do more, but do it faster and more expansively.
And Dr. Cronin, more than any other policymakers in Washington, Mr. Colby was open to the idea of South Korea getting its own nuclear weapons. Aren't people around President Trump share this realist kind of view as Mr. Colby? And do you think there's a possibility that President Trump's 2016 comment about the possibility of Japan and South Korea getting their own nuclear weapons, that could be further developed under the second Trump administration? And also the possibility that USFK could be downsized and nuclear deterrence could be strengthened to be more cost-effective?
Well, we're dealing with a lot of speculation at a very difficult time. Let me just start with, say, the new Senate leaders who are going to matter so much, Senators Wicker and Risch, who have now been named as the Senate Armed Services and Foreign Affairs Committee chairs in January when the Republicans are the majority in Senate. I think that they're very important players in this. They're deeply committed to extended deterrence, to making sure that we strengthen further the ability of the United States nuclear umbrella to guarantee the security of South Korea working through this alliance. And they're willing to think about the reintroduction of nuclear weapons to the peninsula, for instance. I think those are steps that are more likely to happen than South Korea suddenly being sort of giving the green light to go off and get a nuclear weapon on its own. But I don't think those pressures stop in South Korea. That is, South Korea now has a long-term challenge. How do we South Koreans ultimately deter on our own North Korea's nuclear weapons arsenal, especially if it keeps building up, and if the Americans suddenly change their mind and reduce their commitment? And I think that's where this issue is still going to carry on. But I don't think Undersecretary Bridge Colby, if he's confirmed, as I think he will be leading with this issue. But I can also see him saying, let's put everything on the table. Let's study this issue. I do know that people who are likely to go into the second Trump administration beyond Bridge Colby are very committed to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. They're saying the United States has benefited a great deal from the NPT regime. The NPT regime was broken, but at the same time, just because, as Bridge Colby has said in the past, North Korea, China, Russia have been helped more than we have, and our allies have been by this regime, it doesn't mean that you can't adapt and try to strengthen that regime while we strengthen extended deterrence. But this is all going to happen in the context of putting more pressure on South Korea to do more, not because South Korea hasn't done a lot, and not because it doesn't spend a lot on defense. It's just because the challenges are bigger, and we need more help to deal with a growing, assertive China. And so that's the reality, and I think we're going to have to manage this together, and unless we can manage this together, we're going to both be hurt in terms of our fundamental interests. So we have to manage this together. Bridge Colby will manage this together. I believe in his strategic acumen, whatever he has said in the past, to make sure that U.S. and South Korean strategic leaders of any party are working in alignment.
And Mr. Klingner, considering President Trump is a skeptic about alliance, the U.S., South Korea, Japan trilateral cooperation, would that be weakened when compared to President Biden? Or would President Trump see value in that, in counterbalancing against China?
Well, we wonder how much to extrapolate from the first term. Is during the first term, there was less emphasis on the U.S. playing a behind-the-scenes role in trying to bring about reconciliation between Seoul and Tokyo. It was seen more as that's their issue, they have to deal with it, overcome the historic and sovereignty disputes. There was greater behind-the-scenes actions under the Obama and Biden administrations. So we don't know how much that will be extrapolated.
And just briefly, Dr. Cronin, Congressional Research Service report says that the suspension of President Yoon's authorities raised questions about the staying power of his foreign policy. Would the Trump administration agree with the foreign policy direction of Korean progressives?
Well, the Congressional Research Service does great work, and I happen to agree with that general assessment that we have lost the moment on what has been a rising, ascending trajectory in U.S.-Korean relations, including trilateral relations with Japan. We haven't necessarily lost all of the benefits, but we're not going to be rising anymore. We're sort of in a stalemate. We have to protect what we've already negotiated. I think we do have to worry about progressive policies in